Before we dive in, here's another show you can enjoy in the True Story FM family of entertainment podcasts. Hey there, true believers. Andy Nelson here from the Marvel Movie Minute podcast with the rest of the team.
Pete Wright, Kyle Olson,
Rob Cabasco,
and Matthew Fox.
This is the podcast where we dissect the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time, exploring every detail of this epic superhero franchise.
In our season looking at Iron Man 3, we're going to mix things up a bit.
That's right, Rob and I are your guides, but instead of our usual minute-by-minute format, we dive into 5 minutes of the film in each weekly episode.
It's a totally new approach, but one that still allows us to explore all the depth and detail that makes these movies so special, even if Iron Man 3 isn't all that special.
Hold on, that's where you're wrong. Extremist, Shane Black.
Yeah, would you like to look at the Mandarin and Maya Hansen? Mm-hmm.
So whether you're a die-hard Marvel fan or just love deep dives into movies, there's something for everyone on Marvel Movie Minute.
Suit up and join us on this epic audio adventure. You can find us at truestory.fm or by searching Marvel Movie Minute on your favorite podcatcher.
Because in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, every minute is packed with excitement.
Enough said.
Okay, now for the lightning round.
I'm so good at lightning rounds. That's from Friends. It's my favorite show.
20 seconds on the clock starts now. Who is the captain of the USS Enterprise?
Oh, crap. Is it, Captain Stubing? No, Morgan? Crunch?
Next question. Which superhero is Tony Stark?
Stark. Did Game of Thrones have superheroes? I only watched 2 episodes.
What planet were Luke and Leia born on?
Planet Fitness?
Oh, time's up. Sorry. And now, a word from our sponsor.
Hey everybody, Mandy Kaplan here. Please check out my podcast, Make Me a Nerd, where each week an incredible guest tries to baptize this mainstream mom into the world of sci-fi, fantasy, and all things nerdy. Available wherever you podcast.
That's our show, folks.
Wait, I just thought of it. Padme Amidala gave birth to her twins Luke and Leia on Polis Massa. No, that's dumb. Is it Planet Hollywood?
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Generations podcast. We are continuing our journey through Skeleton Crew, making our way back towards At-Aton at the end of the series. With only 1 episode left after today, but today we're talking about episode 7. It is myself and the official Jod hater, Erin. Alex is away doing family things, and so you've got just the 2 of us. Erin, what do we think of this episode?
Oh, I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I loved when it started out with the parents. I was like, finally, we're going to get to see more of the parents. We're back to At-Aton. Like, let's go. And then when the episode actually got everyone on the planet of At-Aton, I was like, hell yeah. I did not think we were going to get this far, but let's go.
Yeah, I had kind of wondered what was the point of the parents. Was it just meant to be like a little diversion, showing us things? But we actually got some real connection here. And let me just try and give a quick plot summary of the episode for those who maybe are listening to this later or you're not watching the show, which, again, pause it, watch the show. It is so much fun. But if you don't want to, that's fine. We'll still take your listenership. Basically what happens is we open with the parents. They've put together the plan. They send out a beacon. The droids are chasing them through the woods and are being very kind of like friendly sounding and very like, please don't do that. We will have to stun you if you do. And it's very kind of like benevolent, authority in a way that's both like effective and terrifying. But also like, I wouldn't mind it if people had a way of like, just literally stunning people without doing further harm in law enforcement. That'd be kind of cool. But also like, the utter lack of compassion, the utter lack of any interest in talking to these parents. It's just, you're doing this thing. It's not okay. We have to stop you. But they do. All the parents get stunned, but Farah manages to get the message off. And it's just this beacon that kind of floats up and then sends out a message. And meanwhile, we have more shenanigans among the pirate crew. Jod is now thoroughly in charge. Forgive me. We start out still with Brutus in charge, and Brutus kind of telling Jod, unless this is really At-Aton, he's going to go walk the plank in the piratical sense, which in this case is out an airlock.
Yep.
I will say, by the way, quick interjection. Have you seen the TV show Black Sails?
I have not.
Black Sails is a wonderful show. It's pirates in the early 1700s. It's, a lot of interesting, like, piratical politics, awesome scenes, fascinating characters, a lot of sexy men in black leather. Like, it is a good
Love.
show. It also winds up being a prequel to Treasure Island, which is kind of wonderful and
Hmm.
off the wall. But in it, they're constantly talking about the pirate code. So it just, like, it's hitting my
Yes.
brain that we're talking about this in a bunch of different ways. But anyway, Jod does some shenanigans. He manages to kind of trick Brutus into running into the ship with the kids to get Brutus out of the way. He kills Brutus pretty brutally and takes control of the pirate ship. And then there are some shenanigans where the kids are able to break away because they're able to, again, use the pirate code that Smee is so fond of. They're able to claim claimsies on the ship and claimsies for kids only, which is kind of fantastic. Little
Mm-hmm.
generational warfare got going on, which,
Yep.
me and the older folks have to, be a little careful of, but I understand. Erin, we can trust you and know you are not you're solidly on the side of us older folks. So the point there being that eventually we were now seeing Jod's true colors, because eventually he winds up pulling out a lightsaber, the same lightsaber that excuse me, Wim tried to use. He clearly knows how to use it, and the first thing he does is chop Smee's head off.
Mhm.
33 SM-33, the droid who's been helping, and the droid who turned on the pirates by, like, well, nope, the young girl claimed it, kids only. I've got to obey the
Mhm.
pirate code. He just flat out, like, decapitates the droid.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty shocking moment, and he is clearly now, like, deadly threatening these kids. I have this lightsaber. I'm going to chop you to pieces. I'm going to chop your family to pieces.
Mhm.
We get to the At-Aton, and we finally learn a lot more about At-Aton. We learn that this is definitely a vault planet for the New Republic, for the Old Republic, but that they're used to getting emissaries from the Republic. And interesting, I don't think they ever say the words New Republic. It's that they're used to getting emissaries from the Republic. And when this ship shows up, everyone thinks it's an emissary. There's a whole thing about all non-essential work has to stop, and they take Jod and the ship to to the vault where there's just, like, gold credits. It looks like, uh, 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 any kind of a heist movie where they get themselves into the bank and you see, like, the glow of the gold on all the shelves and that kind of thing. And meanwhile, the droids are kind of aware that these kids are there and they want to reunite them with the parents, but the droids don't seem to be really aware that anything wrong is happening. They think this is all kind of, on the up and up. And we end with the kids and the parents reunited and Erin dropping out. Erin's back. Internet is weird, but we're still good to go. Point being, though, it all ends up with Jod holding his lightsaber on the kids and the adults, and this, sense of dread and what's going to happen now. We're about to see the supervisor from At-Aton arrive. We've heard his voice. It is not the voice of Hondo Anaka. I had only a very small hope, but I did have a hope. That hope has been dashed against the rocks of the cruel plot. But yeah, so that's where we are.
I had a great time. I liked how much we covered. First of all, yeah, my name here is official Jod hater. I was holding out some hope that he was like maybe still gonna come around in the end. Like, I think I said in the last episode on the podcast, I had lost most of my hope when he crawled out of that manhole covered in jewels. I was like, oh no, he sucks. This guy sucks.
Yep.
But yeah, it was confirmed because, like you said, he killed Brutus. But what it was is that the kids had captured Brutus with like a little claw on their ship, and that was kind of their bargaining chip of like, let us go or we'll kill him.
Mhm.
And so then just Jod killed Brutus and
Right.
was like, fuck it, go get the kids. Like, you don't have a bargaining chip.
Right. And in so doing, he both eliminates the biggest
Mhm.
threat to himself in Brutus, but also, as you said, takes away the powers
Yeah,
the kids have.
exactly.
Yeah, I think I'm where you are with Jod. I Here's the biggest thing. I think that now he is past redemption, in that
Mhm.
he is going to be a bad guy for the show, and I think that's fine. And I think I'm curious to
Mhm.
know what his Jedi background is, and I don't want him to be another Order 66 refugee, but I think, him being someone who had some connection to the Jedi or just has some force training or whatever, all that, and then he broke bad for whatever reason, all that's fine. But I think we are now past the point where if it turns out he does have some, "Oh, I was doing all this for the kids' safety all along," Erin just literally rolled her eyes for those listening on the podcast, and I was gonna say it will be very I eye roll worthy. Um, because
Yeah.
it just like just accept he's just the villain, and that's okay, and he's a great villain.
Yeah.
And I think the will he won't they that they've done with him has been great. And let's just settle that. Yeah, he's just the villain this time. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like going into the show, we didn't know very much about it, but just on like the few photos I had seen and stuff, I was like, oh, I'm guessing, they meet this guy. He like helps them along the way, da da
Uh-huh.
da. I didn't quite see it coming, but it became very apparent, once we realized he was a pirate captain, that it was not going to be quite the rainbows and sunshines I may have thought when I first
Yeah.
walked into the series. But
And
I
go ahead.
I was just gonna say on Jod's like past, I kind of don't. We'll find out, or maybe we won't find out,
Mhm.
But I'm perfectly happy if there's no Jedi connection. If he's like, yeah, I have these powers, I knew about it, I kind of got to know it myself and learned how to use them. And yeah, he's able to use a lightsaber because at the end of the day, it's a sword,
Yeah.
right? And like you turn it on, you slash off a head. You're threatening children and unarmed, scared adults with
Right.
this. Like I don't think that he has lightsaber training.
He has the
I
Force,
could be
which we've
wrong.
established. Having the Force makes using a lightsaber a lot easier, whether or not you're trained in it.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like his speech to the pirates in, I think it was the last episode where he said, like, you're hungry. You've all been hungry. Like, I've been hungry since the day I was born. I think that's exactly true.
Yeah.
Like, I think that he spun it for them, but I think he's basically like Aladdin type, like
Mhm.
down on his luck, just had to like steal to get by,
Yeah.
but genies don't exist, but the Force does. So then he used that to help him get by.
I could see him being
Um,
someone who wasn't picked for the Jedi and has always had kinda like a bitter chip
mhm,
on his shoulder or something like that. Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I just going back a step, I would say I think he clearly has formed some connections with the kids, and this being a Disney show, this being kind of a lighthearted show, if at the end there's a moment where the kids are in lethal danger and he chooses to like sacrifice some of the gold, like I don't think he would sacrifice himself for them, but he chooses to
mm-mm.
sacrifice some of the gold to help the kids. I wouldn't think I would believe that. It's that although I think I'd rather him just be a like not have any of that kind of, heart of gold moment. But to me, the line that's crossed is last episode, I was sort of like, well, but maybe he has a plan. Maybe he thinks he's doing this for the good of the kid. And that's the point where it's just like, no, this is just not a thing anymore.
Yeah, no, he had a plan, and the plan was just to steal from At-Aton.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the long and short of it.
Yeah. Exactly. What did we think of what
um,
we saw of At-Aton and learning more that this is kind of the Republic? Like, is the whole point just that this is kind of Fort Knox, and so they keep it highly, highly, highly secret? And at one point, they say like, "We'll tell you all of this when you're adults."
mhm.
So, what do you think of all that?
Yeah, like you weren't supposed to find out about this till you were
Right.
graduated, is something that Wendell says to Win. Um, I thought it was interesting. I'm curious about it because I couldn't quite read the situation, but I got the impression that, like, it's very rare to see an emissary.
Mhm.
So, like, in my mind, I don't know, I could be wrong and maybe we'll find out, but I feel like when the parents were like, "Find a Republic emissary," in the back of my head, I'm thinking, like, do these people actually still exist? Or if the planet's been hidden for hundreds of years, do those, like, actual safe emissaries who know where At-Aton is, are they still there
Right.
or not? Because if this, what they call it, if this Deerity, I think they called it, like, that type of a coin is so rare that, like, the pirates had never ever seen one, then are there still Republic emissaries picking up shipments?
Right. 'Cause
There shouldn't be, because that money should be nowhere.
yeah, because we're still only about 30 to 40 years after the fall of the Old Republic. The Old Republic being like what happened before Palpatine. Not
Yeah.
necessarily what happened like pre High Republic or something like that. So yeah,
Mhm.
so like, and it wouldn't be like Palpatine never did a big currency well, he did kind of, but I don't think we would have gotten all these coins out of circulation. So yeah, this feels like something where
Yeah.
like maybe the emissaries came every 10 years or so, but they haven't come for a few generations. Or maybe
Yeah.
they did only come every 100 years, and so they haven't noticed it hasn't come because I will say that was the point where I like the idea of the droids being very kind of like they're so methodical that they don't want to listen. But the thing
Mhm.
is that most of the droids that we've seen in the show are able to take in new information. Even the like Roger droids are able to adjust. And like once you realize like the droids know that these parents have been saying, "Oh my god, our kids are missing. This is a problem." And they're mostly focused on like, "Well, that's too bad about your kids. We can't break the barrier." But still they know that like
Mhm.
the kids went missing. And so the idea that then Jod would show up and clearly not like there's no evidence that he's an emissary, but they would just take his word on it, even when he acts a little suspicious about it, and he's got these kids. Uh, Something about the fact that there was no alarm bells being raised in what is supposed to be such a high security kind of a situation kind of made me like raise an eyebrow. And maybe it's just because like there is like the supervisor actually is now on high alert, and we're going to see that next episode. Maybe it's just that they didn't write that well enough. But that was the first time in this show that I've been a little like, doesn't really line up for me.
The way I kind of think about it is like, the parents had sent out that message. The droids don't necessarily know that, but like they told the kids to find an emissary. This guy shows up saying he's an emissary. They haven't seen one of those for 50, 60
Right.
years. How do they know what they're supposed to look like? Like maybe they used to have a uniform, maybe they don't anymore. So that's kind of like what I took it is like these droids are just like so programmed that they're like, well, you came in the ship.
That's fair.
This is the protocol. Which I see what you're saying about like they're not intaking information, like processing it.
Right.
It's like they see the ship and that's kind of like their green light to be like, let's go.
Right. And we did learn that Onyx was at one point an emissary's ship. So
Yeah, like it was an At-Aton ship, technically, not
right.
from
Which
elsewhere.
raises the question of like why did it crash or how did all this happen? So
Yeah. I really hope that the supervisors tack Renard
mm-hmm.
because I just want to know. I want to know the tea. How
Right.
did you? Because the thing is, like, if the emissary ship is inside of his big pirate ship, that means that he had to have taken that ship, gotten out, built a ship around it. But then how'd he get in the first place?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
I'd love to know.
There's a lot of
I'm
questions, and
endlessly curious.
we only have one episode, and it's hard sometimes to put everything into the episode. I hope that we're going to get more about this period of time. Not necessarily more shows, but
Mhm.
maybe some books or some comics or something else that goes deeper
Yeah.
into the history of all this. Uh,
Yeah.
if
Yeah, it would be
if
interesting.
nothing else, because I do think I want to spend more time with pirates, and part of that's because I just watched Black
Mhm.
Sails, then Muppet Treasure Island, and so I've got pirates on the brain. But also, and I'm sorry I keep beating on this horse. He's not going to be the supervisor. But Riki, my podcast partner over in Superhero Ethics, who's been on this podcast a bunch of times as well, he pointed out that we did see Hondo's ship in the background during that second episode where they're on like the pirate planet, or maybe the third episode. So we do have some
Oh.
confirmation that like Hondo is around in this world. So yeah, I would just love to
Mhm.
see like some of the backstory to all this and where's Hondo fit into all that.
Yeah.
Um, Another totally tangential aside, and it was such a quick thing, but I feel like it's definitely just whether it's intentional or not, it's a message I can't help but get from this. This whole thing of, oh, we would have told you when we were older.
Mhm.
This to me has always felt like it is such an important lesson in the kind of 1980s Goonies type stories that this is clearly honoring, which aren't just the 1980s, but I think of those kind of heyday of it. But we've said more, which
Mhm.
is that telling kids or not telling kids information because you're worried it will like damage them or cause them to be afraid or cause them to be curious, and that it's better to just lie to kids or not give them the information, and with a belief that they'll never be curious and they'll never look into it until they're ready to hear
Mhm.
it at 18. It just never ever works. And that's whether it's
Yeah.
like sex ed or it's about like, chemicals they shouldn't be taking or about like the big secret of the family. Like they're always going to be curious. They're always
Yeah.
going to look into it. And the amount of those kind of movies and books and stories that I can think of that started because they always said like, oh, just don't go in grandpa's attic. We never open grandpa's closet. But the kids get
Mhm.
curious and they do, and that starts the adventure. Like I just love that little homage to that kind of trope of storytelling.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been an awesome show so far.
Mhm.
I have a friend who's living in New Zealand and he's not like a big Star Wars guy, like he likes the movies. He rewatched them last year, but he hasn't seen all the shows. And he asked about this because he had heard about it. And I was like, hey, it's honestly like pretty fun. It has nothing to do with the rest of Star Wars.
Mhm.
And he started watching it and he texted me and he's like, I'm halfway through the first episode. I'm going to be honest, it's really slow. And I said, please, I'm begging you, just make it through the second episode. I know it's slow, but it will get there.
Yeah.
And then he finished it and texted me and was like, okay, at the end of the first episode, like I'm intrigued now. Like I'm going to go in for the second one as well.
Yeah.
I was like, nice. But I love how it's so open to like casual fans like that. And that it is bringing in so many new aspects and so many different types of storytelling. Like I mentioned on the last episode, or maybe the one before, it's like these feelings of like national treasure and Pirates of the Caribbean kind of that we haven't gotten in Star Wars content before. So it's really fun to kind of have those different influences in it.
No, I think you're so right, especially because, like, you don't need to know what the word Sith means. You don't need to know the history of Darth Maul or Darth Vader, or like think about how when Ahsoka came out, and a lot of people were saying that they wished that it felt too much like Rebels season 5, and how much you had to have seen Rebels. And some people disagreed, and as someone who had seen it, I can't really speak to that. But I feel like this is one of the most accessible. This is one of the most you can have watched nothing else and watch this, and it's all self-contained in a really beautiful way.
Yeah. Yeah, it is nice because you don't even have to, like you said, have an understanding of the Jedi or the Sith. Like nobody in the show has an understanding of them, so it's fine.
Exactly. Like there's a guy with a laser sword in a world with spaceships and all this kind of crazy sci-fi. Like laser sword isn't that big a deal anyway, so who cares?
Yeah.
This is gonna be a short episode because we've got both got a lot going on. We're not doing any bonus content today, but any other last things you wanted to bring up? What's on your list?
Yeah, I want to talk about when Jod comes back on the Onyx Cinder, like after. So yeah, basically the kids used SM-33 to get their pirates off the ship, calling claimsies, unclaimsies and claimsies, which was pretty cool. But right, and then they escape, and then they realize Jod is still on the ship, and that's when you said he decapitated SM-33, and the rat was beside himself angry. I thought Jod was gonna stomp on the rat, and I was gonna like flip a fucking table. I was gonna lose my shit, but he just kicked the rat to the side, which I was much more okay with. I'm like, it's disrespectful, but I'm glad you didn't just stomp on him.
Especially because, and maybe I'm holding out too much hope here, but we've seen droid parts can be detached and reattached.
Oh, totally.
There's no personality matrix held in the wires that connect the head to the body. So I think it is completely possible that 33 is reassembled and is back. Like I don't think he is dead in that kind of a regard, the way for any other kind of living thing, cutting its head off is literally the like, nope, it's dead. That's gone.
No, I agree. We've seen lots of droids come back from similar or worse situations. So I hope we get it back at the end of the show. I think that we will. Just based on how attached the kids are to him. It would feel weird if the show ended without the kids being like, what about 33?
If C-3PO can be C-3PO while his head is attached to a B-1 battle droid, then Smee is still with us in some way.
Exactly. Exactly. But I want to talk about like how fucking cruel Jod is. Like I lost like when he told Neil to shut up, like stop your blabbering, and Wim said like leave him alone, and he looked at Wim, he said, you are the worst one.
Oh my god, my heart broke for that kid.
Boy. I was like, that's just so fucking cruel after the conversation they had like 2 episodes ago where he was like pretending to be there for not Neil, sorry, pretending to be there for Wim and like, oh, attachments are hard, but and spewing what we all knew was bullshit, but I thought at least he had good intentions. But no, this bitch was just learning their weaknesses so he could be as mean as possible to these children. Like you could just tell him to shut up. You don't have to like tear him apart like that. And just fucking the way he taunted Fern, I was like, this guy sucks. I hate this motherfucker. Like, good job, Jude Law. Great performance.
I'm not saying this to justify him, but I think to help explain him, I don't think we're supposed to get from that he's just like evil McEvil, like cruel person. I think there's some of his backstory there because he also refers to them as spoiled. And
True.
to me, I think what that's saying is that he is someone who, again, yeah, I mean, like that guy who didn't get picked by the Jedi, like maybe
Mhm.
he was supposed to be on At-Aton but wasn't. Like there's something about the way what these kids have that he didn't have, and he's jealous of it, and he's mad
Yeah.
at the kids because they get to have this perfect At-Aton experience. And so man, maybe he was connected to the ship that I'm having to spin this pretty hard, but like some captain from At-Aton was on the ship and it crashed, and so he never got to grow up on At-Aton the way he was supposed to. I have no idea what it's going to be. It's probably not that elaborate, but
Yeah.
I like the implication that he has some personal resentment towards these kids beyond just you are young life forms in the way of me getting my fortune.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree. Because he called them sheltered and spoiled. So,
Yeah.
like, yeah, whether it's he has actual connection to At-Aton or not, I don't really think he did. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna call claimsies on this podcast, claimsies on that theory. No. I'm just kidding.
This is not a podcast. This is not a pirate ship. You're not going to go call claimsies.
Unfortunately, Matthew, by the podcast code, claimsies have been called, so Erin is now in control of this podcast.
All right, fine. It is now your podcast. You go on with your theory.
Thank you. I will. So yeah, no, I think Jod just kind of like almost like maybe Han Solo style grew up would be a better representation of just
Uh-huh.
like fighting to stay alive. And it's just the idea of any child with a happy home is just like rage.
Yeah.
And then like seeing these kids and getting so close to them and having that rage in the back of your mind so that every little thing that they say is just chipping on your childhood hurt of like not being able to have safety, not being able to have security financially or emotionally. And yeah, so I think you're right. I didn't notice or I didn't put together because I
Mhm.
just watched it today. Usually I'll watch it yesterday and
Yeah.
then today as well, so it sinks in. But yeah, I kind of forgot about how he called them spoiled
Yeah.
and sheltered. But yeah, it's so I think you're right. It wasn't necessarily out of hatred or spite to be like, let me be as cruel to these children as possible. I think it's like I have my own issues, and that means I'm going to be really cruel to these children.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, it might be that he just grew up in a shitty situation. It's nothing to do with he wanted that, but he sees and again, that's often kind of a theme. Like I remember part of the both joy and frustration of watching those movies because it's not that I was a suburban kid. I wasn't.
Mhm.
And so watching these kids where they weren't worried about like is their mother going to get fired from their job or is there going to be food on the table or stuff like that. They were worried about, like are they going to be home in time for supper? And
Mhm.
is like what's going to happen to their bike? And we were both sort of like envious of them, but also like it's fun to escape with them. And
Yeah.
and so yeah, so I kind of like just that dynamic that's being set up where there's nothing wrong with it, but these are kids from a privileged background where
Mhm.
even at the end, like early in this episode, they were talking about how this was a really fun adventure, and they're so
Yeah.
glad. Like Win is like, I wish I hadn't pushed that button, but they're like, no, we're glad you did. And
Mhm.
hilariously, he's still like, well, but I still have to take the SATs. That's the worst thing that can happen
No,
here.
literally.
He literally says that assessor test, which I'm so curious about. So, all right, it is
Uh,
your podcast now, but is it okay with you if I close out the podcast now that you have claims he's on it and all that?
I I'm okay with that. I'll allow it.
Okay, cool. Unclaimed claims these for people born after before 2000. So now my
Hey.
podcast again. Sorry, kids. This is an adult only podcast. That sounds wrong, but you know what I mean. We'll have
Oh.
claims these battles going forward. Don't tell Alex. Point is though, thank you all so much for listening. Members, we are not going to have any members only content for you this episode. We will, of course, next episode. We just need a break at the moment. But of course, you can become a member, $5 a month, $55 a year, no ads, bonus content. Help us keep the lights on. And other ways you can support the podcast, buy a lightsaber. Do you want to be Jod? Forget being Obi-Wan. Do you want to be Jod? He's cool. He's Jude Law. He gets to have all kinds of crazy adventures and be a pirate and have a lightsaber. You can have a lightsaber too. Level Up Lightsabers by friend of the podcast, Neighborhood Master Alan. All the information is in the show notes. all the information about how to become a member in the show notes, all the information about how to support the fact that we have called claimsies on this. If you're Generation X or older, this is the podcast for you. If you're younger, the kids' table, we put a microphone at the kids' table. The generational warfare will end after this episode, I promise. But someone claimed claimsies. I have to stomp this back down. Thank you all so much for listening. We have spoken.
That's all. At-Aton.
But don't stay classy.
Oh, stay classy, At-Aton.
There we go. There we go.
We're dead meat. We're pirate meat. That's poor Neil panicking.
Poor Neil.